The soap slipped from my hands. A slick trader that hit the tiled floor with a wet slap, echoing in the steamy prison shower like a gunshot. My heart stopped as every eye in the room turned. The air thick with the kind of silence that could choke a man. I was Ethan Carter, 3 months into a 5-year sentence. And I'd just made the kind of mistake that could cost me everything. The Florence Correctional Facility in Arizona wasn't a place for second chances. It was a concrete jungle where survival meant keeping your head down and your fists ready. I'd learned that fast, dodging the predators who sized me up the day I arrived. A 28-year-old former mechanic convicted for a carjacking I didn't commit. Framed by a cousin who'd always hated me. I was here, stripped of my life, my garage, my freedom. The shower was the worst part, exposed. Vulnerable. A stage for the wolves to circle. And now, that damn soap had betrayed me. I braced myself, expecting laughter, a shove, or worse. Instead, a shadow moved, quick and quiet. A hand reached down, not to strike, but to pick up the soap. I looked up, and there he was, Javier Ruiz, the guy who kept to himself, whose dark eyes seemed to hold secrets heavier than mine. He pressed the soap into my palm, his fingers lingering a fraction too long, and whispered, "Careful, man. You don't want their attention." His voice was low, steady, like a lifeline thrown into a storm. Javier was an enigma, a 30-year-old artist who'd landed here after a bar fight went wrong. Or so the rumors said. He didn't belong here any more than I did, with his quiet demeanor and sketches that covered his cell walls' landscapes. Faces, dreams he'd never speak of, in a place where trust was a currency nobody could afford. His small act of kindness felt like a crack in the universe. I mumbled a thanks, my face burning, and turned back to the water. But something had shifted. That night, lying on my bunk, the memory of his touch burned brighter than the fear that usually kept me awake. I didn't know it then, but that moment Javier handing me that soap was the beginning of something that would either save me or destroy me. Days bled into weeks, and the prison's rhythm became a grind, clanging gates, shouted orders, the constant hum of tension. I kept my distance from trouble, sticking to my routine work in the laundry, meals in the mess hall, nights staring at the ceiling. But Javier was everywhere now, like a song stuck in my head. He'd nod at me across the yard, his eyes catching mine for a split second before he looked away. Once, he slipped me an extra apple from the kitchen, his fingers brushing mine again, sending a jolt through me I didn't understand. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Growing up in a small Arizona town, I'd been taught that men like me didn't look at other men like that. My dad's voice still echoed in my head, calling it wrong, unnatural. But in here, where everything was already broken, those rules felt like ghosts fading. Powerless. Javier didn't talk much, but when he did, it was like he saw me, not the inmate number on my jumpsuit. He'd ask about my life before, my garage, the cars I used to fix. I'd tell him about the '67 Mustang I'd rebuilt, and he'd smile, describing the murals he'd painted in Tucson, colors so vivid I could almost see them. One night in the rec room, he showed me a sketch of desert sunset, all fiery oranges and purples, with 2 tiny figures standing side by side. "That's us," he said, his voice soft but certain. My throat tightened. I wanted to say something, anything, but fear clamped my mouth shut. This was prison. Feelings like this could get you hurt, or worse. The next day, trouble found me. Big Tommy, a lifer with a shaved head and a mean streak, cornered me in the laundry room. He'd been watching me, waiting for a slip-up. "You think you're special, Carter," he sneered, shoving me against a dryer. My fists clenched, but I knew fighting back would only make it worse. Then Javier appeared, calm as ever, holding a stack of towels like a shield. "Back off, Tommy," he said, his voice steady but sharp. Tommy laughed but stepped back, muttering something about Ruiz's boy. The word stung, but Javier's presence was a wall I could lean against. That night, we sat in the yard, the stars barely visible through the floodlights. "Why'd you do that?" I asked, my voice low. Javier shrugged, his shoulder brushing mine. "Because you're worth it," he said, like it was the simplest truth in the world. My heart pounded, and for the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear-hope. But hope in a place like this was dangerous. The guards were always watching, and the inmates were worse. Whispers about me and Javier started to spread, ugly and sharp. I heard them in the mess hall, saw them in the glares across the yard. "Fags," someone hissed one day, loud enough for everyone to hear. My stomach twisted, but Javier just grabbed my hand under the table, his grip steady, grounding. "Let them talk," he whispered. "They can't touch what's real." The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Javier and I carved out moments where we could quiet talks in the library, stolen glances in the yard. He showed me more of his sketches, each one a window to a world outside these walls. I told him about my mom, how she'd send me letters every week, believing in my innocence even when I'd started to doubt it myself. He told me about his sister in Tucson, how she was raising his nephew, how he'd do anything to see them again. But the prison wasn't done with us. One afternoon, a guard named Kessler, a hard ass with a vendetta against anyone who didn't fit his idea of normal, caught us sitting too close in the rec room. "You two getting cozy?" he barked, his baton tapping against his palm. My blood ran cold. Kessler had a reputation for making life hell, and he'd just found his new target. That night, Javier slipped a note into my hand, a tiny sketch of a bird flying over a wall, with the words, "We'll get out of here together." I hid it under my mattress, my heart racing. I didn't know if he meant out of prison or out of the pain, but I wanted to believe in both. The next morning, Kessler pulled us aside during roll call. "You think you're untouchable," he spat, his eyes flicking between us. "This ain't no love story." He assigned us to separate work details, ensuring we'd barely see each other. Worse, he spread word among the inmates, painting a target on our backs. The whispers turned into threats, and I could feel the walls closing in. But Javier didn't back down. He found ways to reach me, a note passed through a trustee, a quick nod across the yard. Each one was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. I started to realize that what I felt for him wasn't just a reaction to this place. It was real, raw, and terrifying. I'd never loved anyone before. Not like this. And in a place built to break you. That love felt like defiance. By the time we hit the 3-month mark since the soap incident, I was different. Stronger. Maybe. But also more vulnerable. Javier had cracked open something in me I didn't know existed, a part that wanted to fight. Not just for survival, but for something worth living for. But the prison had other plans. And the storm was coming faster than either of us could outrun. The air in Florence Correctional grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were conspiring to crush us. Javier and I were now marked men, our every move watched by Kessler's hawk-like eyes and the inmates who thrived on chaos. The prison was a pressure cooker, and our quiet rebellion, our stolen moments. Our unspoken promises had lit a fuse. One evening in the mess hall, I felt it coming. Big Tommy and his crew sat 2 tables over, their stares like knives. Javier was across the room, forced to sit apart by Kessler's orders. I kept my head down, picking at the gray slop on my tray. But the tension was electric. Then it happened. A tray crashed to the floor, deliberate and loud. Tommy stood, his voice booming. Carter's got himself a boyfriend. Laughter erupted, cruel and jagged. My face burned, but I didn't look up. Not until I heard Javier's chair scrape. He was on his feet, staring Tommy down, his jaw tight. "Say it again," he said, his voice low but lethal. The room went quiet, every eye on them. I wanted to yell at Javier to stop, to sit down, but my voice was stuck. Tommy smirked, stepping closer. "What's the matter, Ruiz?" "Protecting your little princess." Before Javier could respond, a guard Kessler's lackey stepped in, shoving Javier back. "Sit down, Ruiz, or you're in the hole." Javier's eyes met mine for a split second, a silent apology, before he sat. That night, I couldn't sleep. The word boyfriend echoed in my head, not as an insult, but as a truth I was too scared to claim. I'd never put a name to what Javier and I had, but it was there, growing like a fire I couldn't control. I pulled out his sketch from under my mattress, tracing the bird's wings with my finger. Freedom felt so far away, but with Javier, it was like I could taste it. The next day, Kessler escalated. He transferred Javier to a different cell block, a move designed to isolate us. I felt like I was drowning, the absence of his presence a physical ache. But Javier was relentless. He found ways to get messages to meth rough a kitchen worker. A folded note hidden in a book. One read, "You're my reason to keep going." My hands shook as I read it, torn between joy and terror. In here, love wasn't just a risk. It was a weapon others could use against you. I started noticing things I hadn't before: other inmates who kept their heads down, who exchanged quick glances like we did. There was a quiet network of people like us, surviving in the shadows. One guy, Marcus, a wiry lifer with kind eyes, slipped me a tip during laundry duty. "Keep it quiet, Carter. Kessler's got it out for you too. He's waiting for an excuse." I nodded, my stomach churning. Marcus didn't say it, but I knew an excuse could mean anything: to fight, a wrong look, or just Kessler's word against ours. The breaking point came a week later. I was in the yard, alone, when Tommy and his crew surrounded me. "Where's your shadow, Carter?" Tommy taunted, cracking his knuckles. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "Leave it, Tommy," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed, shoving me hard. I stumbled, my back hitting the fence. Before I could swing, Javier was there, out of nowhere, pulling Tommy back. "Touch him again, and you're done," Javier growled, his eyes blazing. It was a mistake. The guards were on us in seconds, batons raised. Kessler himself dragged Javier away, his smirk chilling. "You're done, Ruiz." I tried to follow, but another guard slammed me against the fence, cuffing my wrists. "You're next, Carter," he hissed. They hauled Javier to solitary, and I was sent to my cell, the door slamming shut like a coffin lid. For 3 days, I didn't see him. The prison felt colder, emptier. I worked laundry, ate in silence, and lay awake, imagining the worst. Solitary was hell, 24 hours of nothing but your own thoughts. No light, no sound. I hated thinking of Javier there, alone with his demons. On the 3rd night, I broke. I punched the wall until my knuckles bled. The pain a distraction from the fear that I'd lost him. When Javier finally came back, he was different. Thinner, quieter, his eyes shadowed. We met in the library, a rare moment Kessler hadn't blocked. I wanted to hug him, to hold him, but the cameras were watching. Instead, I slid a book across the table, my fingers brushing his. "You okay?" I whispered. He nodded, but his smile was forced. "They can lock me up, Ethan," he said softly, But they can't lock this up. He tapped his chest, right over his heart. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep pretending this was just survival. I loved him. The word felt huge, terrifying, but undeniable. I wrote it down on a scrap of paper. I love you, Javier, and slipped it into his sketchbook the next day. I didn't know if he'd see it, or what he'd do, but I needed him to know. The prison didn't let up. Kessler doubled down, assigning us grueling tasks, cleaning the kitchen at dawn, scrubbing floors late at night. It was punishment, pure and simple, but it also gave us moments alone. One night, in the dim kitchen, Javier grabbed my hand, pulling me into a corner. I saw your note, he whispered, his breath warm against my cheek. I love you too. He kissed me, quick and desperate. And for 1 second, the prison didn't exist. But we weren't careful enough. A guard caught us. Not Kessler, but one of his cronies. The next morning, we were both hauled to the warden's office. My heart was in my throat as we stood there, side by side, waiting for judgment. The warden, a tired man with gray hair, looked at us like we were a problem he didn't want to solve. You're causing trouble, he said. Kessler's pushing for solitary. Maybe worse. My stomach dropped. Worse could mean transfer. Or worse still, a beating disguised as discipline. Javier spoke up, his voice steady. Sir, we're not hurting anyone. We're just trying to survive. The warden sighed, rubbing his temples. Keep it out of sight. Boys, I don't need this headache. It wasn't freedom, but it was a reprieve. We walked out, our shoulders brushing, and I felt like we'd won a battle, even if the war was far from over. The warden's warning was a fragile shield, and we knew it. Javier and I moved like ghosts now, careful not to touch, not to linger too long in each other's orbit. But love, I was learning, wasn't something you could hide forever. It leaked out in glances, in the way I'd pass him an extra blanket during laundry duty, in the way he'd hum a tune I'd told him I liked. Every moment was a risk, but it was also a reason to keep going. The prison, though, was a beast that never slept. Kessler wasn't done with us. He'd lost his chance to bury us in solitary, but he had other ways to hurt. He started random cell searches, tearing through Javier's sketches, ripping some to pieces. Once, he found a shiv in my bunka plant. I was sure, but it earned me a week in segregation. The isolation was brutal, a concrete box that swallowed sound and light. I clung to memories of Javier's voice, his laugh, to keep from losing myself. When I got out, Javier was waiting in the yard, his eyes searching mine like he was checking for cracks. You're still here, he said, relief softening his voice. I nodded, too choked up to speak. We sat on a bench, far enough apart to avoid suspicion, and he told me about a dream he'd had a house by the ocean. Just us. No walls. No guards. I could almost see it. The waves crashing. The salt on my skin. It was a fantasy, but it kept us tethered. The other inmates weren't all against us. Marcus, the lifer from laundry, became an ally, passing messages when Kessler was around. A few others, guys who'd seen too much to care about who we loved, started watching our backs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that even in hell, there were sparks of humanity. Then came the riot. It started in the mess hall, a fight over nothing someone's tray, someone's insult. But in a place like Florence, nothing stayed small. Tables flipped, fists flew, and the guards were too slow to stop it. I was in the kitchen when it happened, scrubbing pots with Javier. The alarms wailed, and we were locked in, trapped as the chaos spread. I could hear shouts, crashes, the crackle of guard radios. My heart raced, but Javier grabbed my hand. pulling me behind a stack of crates. "Stay with me," he said, his voice a lifeline. We crouched there, the world exploding outside, and I realized I wasn't scared. Not with him. "If we get out of this," I whispered, "I'm never letting you go." He smiled. That rare, unguarded smile that made my chest ache. "Deal," he said, and squeezed my hand. The riot lasted hours. When the guards finally stormed in, batons swinging, we were hauled out, cuffed, and lined up in the yard. Kessler was there, his eyes gleaming with opportunity. He pointed at us, accusing us of starting the fight a lie, but one he could sell. We were dragged to the warden again, this time with a crowd of angry inmates watching. The air was thick with blame, and I knew this could be the end. The warden looked exhausted, his desk littered with reports. "I told you to keep it quiet," he said, his voice heavy. Now IV got no response, so I'll continue from where it left off. VE got no choice. "Carter, you and Ruiz are in deep." My stomach twisted, but Javier stood tall, his jaw set. "We didn't start anything, sir," he said. "Check the cameras." The warden sighed, waving us out. "Get out of my sight, and keep your noses clean." It was another close call, but the riot had shifted something in the prison. The chaos had exposed cracks in the system. Guards distracted, schedules disrupted. Javier and I saw our chance. We started planning, whispering in stolen moments. My mom had been working with a lawyer, digging into my case. New evidence had surfaced: a security video from the carjacking. Grainy, but enough to show I wasn't the guy. It wasn't a sure thing, but it was hope. Javier's sentence was shorter. A year left if he kept his head down. We talked about what came next: me getting out, him following. We'd find that house by the ocean, build a life. It sounded crazy, but love makes you believe in crazy things. We started saving small favors traded with inmates. A few dollars here and there. Marcus helped, smuggling notes, even passing a message to my mom through a visitor. But Kessler was a shadow we couldn't shake. He caught us passing a note one day, his grin wicked. "You're done," he said, and I knew he meant it. He planted drugs in Javier's cell, a tiny bag of pills, enough to add years to his sentence. I was losing him, and the rage in me burned hot. I confronted Kessler in the yard, my voice low but shaking. "You're framing him, and you know it." He just laughed. "Prove it, Carter." I couldn't. Not yet. But I wasn't giving up. I went to Marcus, to the others who'd started to trust us. We built a case quietly, carefully. An inmate who'd seen Kessler plant the drugs agreed to talk if we could protect him. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. The hearing came fast. My lawyer presented the video, the testimony, everything we'd scraped together. Javier and I sat in that cold room, our hands inches apart, forbidden to touch. The judge was a hardliner, but the evidence was solid. I held my breath as she ruled, her voice cutting through the silence. "Ethan Carter, all charges dismissed." I was free. I turned to Javier, my heart breaking. He smiled, soft and sure. "Go," he whispered. "I'll find you." I wanted to stay, to fight for him, but he pushed me toward the door, toward the light. Freedom tasted like dust and sunlight. I stepped out of Florence Correctional, the Arizona sun blinding, my mom's arms around me before I could breathe. But Javier was still inside, and every step away from him felt like betrayal. I moved to Tucson, a cheap apartment near the desert's edge. My garage was gone, sold to cover legal fees. But I found work fixing cars at a small shop. Every night, I wrote to Javier letters he might never get, but I sent them anyway, pouring out my dreams. Our dreams. I told him about the ocean, the house we'd built, the life we'd make. My mom helped, mailing them through Marcus, who'd become our lifeline. Javier's hearing was 6 months away. I worked with my lawyer, now his lawyer too, gathering statements from inmates, even a guard who'd turned on Kessler. The evidence was thin but growing a whisper of corruption. A chance to free him. I visited when I could. The glass between us a cruel barrier. His eyes still held that spark. That promise. I'm holding on. Ethan, he'd say, his voice steady through the phone. I'd press my hand to the glass, wishing I could feel his. Life outside was strange. The world moved too fast. Too loud. I'd walk the desert at night. The stars brighter than in prison, but lonelier. I kept Javier's sketches, taped to my wall à sunset. A bird. Us. They reminded me why I was fighting. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since high school. Copying his style, his colors. It was like holding him close. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Marcus got a recording Kessler bragging about framing Javier, caught by an inmate's contraband phone. It was risky, illegal even, but it was gold. We sent it to the lawyer, who worked it into the case. Kessler was suspended, pending investigation, and Javier's hearing was moved up. The day came, and I sat in the courtroom, my heart in my throat. Javier looked older, thinner, but his eyes found mine, steady as ever. The judge heard the tape, the testimony, the truth we'd clawed for. Javier Ruiz. Sentence commuted. She said. I stood, shaking, as they uncuffed him. He walked to me. No glass. No guards. And we held each other. The world fading away. We moved to the coast. A small house in California. The ocean loud outside our window. It wasn't perfect, nightmares lingered. Trust was hard, but we were together. Javier painted, his canvases bright with life. I fixed cars, my hand steady again. We'd sit on the porch, his hand in mine, watching the waves. The prison was a scar, but scars fade. What stayed was us. The love we'd built in the dark. The salvation we'd found when I dropped that soap. Every night, we'd talk about the future, not just ours, but others like us, still trapped. We started volunteering, helping with legal aid, telling our story. It wasn't much, but it was something, an echo of the hope we'd clung to. Love had pulled us through, and now it was our turn to pull back. We weren't just survivors. We were proof that even in the worst places, you could find something worth fighting for.